You always see them going somewhere, composing themselves, going someplace that is quiet. And what we do is, because we are on Mother Earth, I've been reminded, and it's Native American areas have been here for many years, thousands of years, that we always, out of respect, thank them for caring for Mother Earth. And out of respect, even though we don't have all their names, we do know many different Indian nations have traveled to North Carolina. And many of them have been here and now in other places in the United States that we don't think of them as being North Carolinians. But out of that, I always acknowledge the grandfathers, the elders who were here before us and the ones who cared for Mother Earth before we did. So, and I don't know if you could smell it, I smudged the room, used a little sage just to make sure that we had a nice cleansing period of time here and to share with you. It's funny, it's been 10 years. Every November rolls around and the Senior Center has always acknowledged Native American Month, or has asked us to. And I felt bad we missed last year. We got shut out last year, but that's all right. How they say the movies are back. Well, today I was going to update everything that's been happening throughout the world, the nation, and what's happened within the United States that has really, really made big changes for all Indian populations. We're in the politics, we're more and more in the face of the people, they're aware of us, and we're taking advantage of it. And because of that, what has happened in the past, many people just say, well, that's a long time ago. But it's not really. This is all part of our history, all of our history. She's doing good. I don't hear any screaming. But
no smoke either.
no. One of the things, before I get started, can you people see this map up here? It's a map of Greenland all the way through Canada, United States, Mexico, and into Central America. One of the things that has really changed within the last 15 years, could I ask, does anybody here have ancestry? You know, looking up the family and all that? Have anybody in the family that uses ancestry? Well, what has happened is, in the late 60s, 1960s, in a large ranch in Montana, some archaeologists were called when there was some weapons and pottery, all kinds of Native Americans they found on the land. So the archaeologists were called, they came, and can I keep this on? Sorry.
Yeah.
Should I keep this on?
No, take it off.
Usually people tell me, because of your face, keep it covered, but no. What has happened is, on that large ranch, while they were digging, the first things they found that they put checks on, traces on age, were Indian articles that were up to 12,000 years old, long time ago, okay? And they also found from residue, some of the things that were found from some of the bones that they found, that the people, which they called the Clovis people, and I always say this, if you ever want to check, look it up. I always tell everybody, don't believe anything I say, look it up. So on the ranch, the Clovis people were found, and they found that they were going back as far as 15 million years. So now they were given permission to dig on the land.
And what they found was, they found a burial site, relatively small, that had a child in it. It had a little boy, dressed completely in regalia. It had gifts placed around it. It had foods in little containers pressed around it. And one of the first things that this brought to mind is, oh my gosh, they believed in life hereafter. They had religions. They were spiritual. That's the first thing they thought about. So then they said, well, let's get the bones checked out. Let's find out how old this little boy is. Now, because the United States at that time did not have the equipment and the labs to check as far back as these bones were taking them, they ended up sending them to Amsterdam, the largest places to check, and they do all over the world. Things are sent to Amsterdam for their laboratories. They took a powder sample from the skull and from one of the bones in the arm, and they sent it. And what they found was, first of all, that this little boy dated back over 4 million years old. I say 4,000, 4 million years. That's quite a bit back because they haven't had anything like that they found. So then, the United States didn't know what to do because, needless to say, the U.S. didn't exist at that time. So the people in Amsterdam started to take samples, DNA samples, from as far north as the Inuit in the North Pole, all the way down through South America, Central America, Mexico. They took 245 samples just to see what the comparison was to this little boy. Well, what they found changed a lot of things. The reason I mentioned ancestry, because they were one of the biggest ones that was affected. They found that this little boy was from a race that wasn't connected to Europe, to Africa, to Asia, nowhere. They just couldn't find another connection to it. There was no other DNA that fit in. So then they went further back, and you all know about the Bering Straits, okay? A little strip of land, okay? Well, millions of years ago, Beridia existed, which was a land completely between Alaska, Canada, and Asia, Russia, the whole thing. It was all one. And when the lands broke apart, and you all know when Africa broke away from South America and the land shifted, all this land, the majority of it went into the ground or stayed in one or the other side. So what they found is that the people that lived there, they call Beryllians, whatever, they were a unique race. So now what happens is, when they checked the people from North to South America, they found they all had a connection with this little boy, which completely screwed up everything that Ancestry was doing, because Ancestry had everybody going, either you came out of Africa or Asia or a cave in France. No more. They now had a completely new race. So if you have or know anybody who has any indigenous blood in them, and they go on Ancestry and check out or have checked out, they will find out they are now listed as Indigenous Americans. So now all of a sudden you have all these people. The reason I brought this out is because they checked from way up here, actually here, all the way down through here, and they found out from Montana a tie between all of them. And again, that is so monumental to the Native Americans because now we have identity. So we can't.
It's not that for saying we have identity. She got it. Really?
Can't blow my applause. And I was going to say, did you think this was over? There we go.
Oh, look at Jay for sorry. Thank you.
So sorry.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right. Anyhow, this was gonna fit in there anyway, so it fit good, because this is what makes it so tremendous for us, because so many things have happened. I don't know how many of you read about the 9 million-year-old man that was found in the state of Washington. The Army was going to dig it up. Now they had his body, and they didn't know what it was. Remember I said they couldn't check it out. I think the U.S. really didn't want to check it out because it was older than 1776 or whatever. So now the Indians in that area, and I'm not sure if it's the Warm Springs, but anyhow, they're right there in that area. They wanted to bury it. They now had a reason to bury it as a Native American or an Indigenous. And the government, who was arguing before because they didn't know what it was, it now had an identity because it traveled back to the Clovis boy. That little kid did a lot of work. In 2014, the natives in that part of Montana, and you had the Crow and Northern Cheyenne are right in that area. They did Indian ceremony for him, traditional ceremony, and reburied the little boy and even put back some of the artifacts that they found with him, just to, to make sure for them it was done properly. That, if you were ever wanting to say something has really happened great, that's what happened. So anyhow, this is our United States, and the little stars are places where we've lived, had on different reservations, have been blessed to be taken in by many different nations. I myself, by going up north, to the North Pole, to the Inuit, I found out what it was like if you were an indigenous living in the United States before the Europeans came. How connected with spirituality they were, how connected to Mother Earth they were. It was just phenomenal when I went up there to realize these people had just come off the ice. They weren't already attacked by, different religions and all different kinds of things. They were pure. And it's such a wonderful thing to know what the indigenous that lived here. When you notice this map, you see all different colors. This is the way you should have the map split up. Not by states, not by lines, this is Iowa and this is Canada. Those are just lines on maps that the Europeans have made. They're being segregated by the languages they spoke, the similarities. Now, there were different dialects. We all know, especially here in the United States, the dialects. Well, somebody who lives in all their life in North Carolina doesn't sound like somebody who's lived in Massachusetts all their life. We have dialects, even though we speak the same language. So all the different nations that are within those areas spoke the same language, but the dialects were different because they didn't live near each other. Okay. What exactly is this month called? Nobody tell me November, Thanksgiving. That's an easy one.
This is National Native American or Indigenous People Month.
Okay, what does the government call it? They call it American Indian Aborigines, First Nations. That's what Canada calls us. Okay, go ahead. It's National Native American Heritage Month. That's the official thing, okay? Which states have the largest population of Native Americans?
Montana.
Anybody have a guess?
Montana.
Montana?
Arizona.
Arizona?
Yeah.
I don't get any guesses in the back. Oklahoma. Oklahoma. Why not? Go ahead. California has more Native Americans, and if you've ever been and looked at the maps of California, when we were there, I believe there were 37 reservations, or they call them ranchitos, but they're Indian reservations. And they're all over California, but people don't know of that. We learned living there that we went to visit people who lived on some of those reservations. And it was interesting for us because they were in the process of being recognized by the state and then federal, depending how much money they were going to get from either one. So that's what you have in California. Oklahoma, you were close, primarily because many of the nations that were in North Carolina, Florida, many on the West Coast, and surprisingly, many of them on the West Coast, along with the East Coast, had tribes or nations that were moved to Oklahoma. It wasn't just the Trail of Tears. Trail of Tears had more than just Cherokee. They even had Seminoles that were brought up in Florida that were continued because the government didn't know what to do with them. So that's why Oklahoma is a fantastic place if you want to find out about different heritages. Arizona, somebody said Arizona, 391,000. Alaska, 145. And Alaska makes up close to 20% of the indigenous, even though many people think of them as Eskimos or Inuit. Our census says that at 99, almost 100,000 indigenous are registered in the state. But it also says it's 130,000 when combined with other races. When the federal government starts to define who they're going to give aid to, they always define you about if you have other races in there, if you're biracial. Many, many nations are considered biracial. The Black Seminole, the Catawba here in North Carolina, they're considered biracial. And then it goes because of the population and the proximity of the white, black, and Native American, they classify them as tribe. And that's how they get out of this having to pay for people on the reservation. Okay. These are the three nations that were living in North Carolina many, many, many millions of years ago. You have the Siouan, which are now called the Sioux. We all know about the Sioux up in the western states or up in North Carolina, North Dakota, South Dakota, in the area around there. You had the Iroquois, which at that time were not the 6 Iroquois nations that you have now, but they were still called Iroquois. And then the Muscogee. Those you'll find primarily if you go south. You find them in a lot of the southern states. When the Indians were very, very heavy in this area, you had this whole area here, which was called the Mississippians. And they were not only in this area here, they were also in central Mexico and then also in the Yucatan. So this whole area here, they had very heavy trading with Mexico, the Aztecs, Mayans, and Yucatan. So they were called the Mississippians. Okay. This is a law which we ran into when we were in Idaho. Supposedly, that the government had now given the indigenous freedom of religion. Go ahead, hit it. In 1978, that's not long ago, we were given religious freedom. Okay? It's hard to believe. We all think of the Bill of Rights gives everybody. It didn't. In fact, it wasn't until 1924, when we first got the vote, that we were actually given permission to move anywhere in the United States we wanted to. Until that time, we had to stay on the reservation. You weren't considered citizens. But the law came 198 years later after the Bill of Rights, the 95th Congress, and it was not enacted until 2005. That sounds about right for our government. They don't do things too fast. But when we were in Idaho, we had many friends that lived in Fort Hall Indian Reservation in Idaho. And the government was giving them homes. They were building these little wooden homes for them to go into. And a friend of ours, an elder, he felt uncomfortable in boxes, didn't like corners, didn't like anything square. So he built a teepee in the back of his house. He would come in and eat and he'd go back out. He got arrested by the sheriff because it was considered a religious building, because he was doing ceremonies and he was doing smudging, whatever he did there, which for all we know, it was no problem. He liked spending time out there, but because it was considered a sacred building, he got arrested. The sheriff came and took him away and caused a lot of problems, but they brought him back and they told him not to do anything in there. So he had to stop. So this brings up things have changed. And I've already mentioned ancestry. See, it all fit in. I told you all about ancestry beforehand, so you all know about it now. And this is what they're doing now. And if you look at ancestry, because there's thousands and thousands of people that are signing up and checking, they now can tell from where you were born, what indigenous they can call you. In other words, they might call you an indigenous from North America or an indigenous from South America. They know the areas, and they also know they can call you indigenous. It's one of those things that the our Board of Education in DC, they have come up with, because people have asked questions, you know, what do we call you? Of course, right now between Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, you know, there's all kinds of names for what they call people. So what they decided is this: the government will classify you as a Native American, which covers the Samoan Islands, it covers the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, it covers anybody within that area, okay? Now, if you're an American Indian, you are an indigenous within the confines of the United States. That's it. That's how they classify it so they can do it. This is changes. In January 1993, President Bill Clinton decided that as part of his inaugural ball that was held in January, he also invited the Native Americans to come. And they were given a complete area of Native Americans that attended Bill Clinton's inaugural ball. As you can see, my wife and I were lucky enough to be invited to go to the inaugural ball. And in the lower corner, you see a gentleman dressed in regalia. Can you see him? Mm-hmm. That is Ben Nighthorse Campbell. Ben Nighthorse Campbell is the first Native American to be the governor. He's the governor of Colorado at that time. So he came, and because he was he's Crow from Montana, he brought down the drummers and singers from Montana. So we had, you know, some entertainment there that was Native American. The picture over to the right, I don't know if you can see the gentleman standing there with something in his hair. Can you see him? His name is Steve Rivas. Steve is a friend. We've known Steve since Dances with Wolves. And he came, and to show tradition, he is wearing on the back of his head a roach. Everybody goes, a roach! It's not one of those kind of roaches. What a roach is this. It's made out of porcupine hair, and you wear it like so, tie it around. I'm going to do it, but. And this is what he was wearing. There were other people there, other nations that had the roaches on, or they had lapels on their tuxedos that were Native American design. It was really sharp to go in and see that. And when the inaugural ball was starting, Clinton had his ceremony going, and at the same time, right after his ended, then what we had is the entry, the grand entry, where we had the Native Americans from all the services that came in with the American flag to start it. And it was such a wonderful thing, but it's the first time Native Americans have ever been not only invited there, but were even recognized. You're welcome to come and take a look at it. And incidentally, if you have a horse and you cut off his mane, right, you cut it real short, you know what that's called? It's called the roach. So you see,
May I ask a question about the roach?
go right ahead.
Is that only something a male of the tribe can wear?
Primarily, yes. Yeah. The women dress up a heck of a lot better than we do.
Well,
Let me
it's
tell
in
you.
African culture too, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, whenever they're going into, when they put on their roach, whenever they're going into a powwow or something, or they're going to a traditional gathering, what they do is, and it's got a little pocket up here, a bone, they put a feather in it, but it's never tied down. Just like from Mother Earth, you don't tie it down. It goes by the wind or as they move. But they don't put that in unless it's a special gathering. And many times, the males will wear an eagle feather. If they've earned an eagle feather, this is where they're going to show it. You won't know an elder has an eagle feather unless they want you to know, because it's a special thing. Anyhow.
Would they wear more than one feather
They'll wear other feathers,
at the same time?
not usually. I mean, you wouldn't mix an honor feather with a turkey feather. Okay, well, I'm sure most of you have seen or read in the paper, we now have an Interior Secretary that is Native American. Now, which ones are we going to be talking about today? Are we going to be are we mysterious? We see a lot of pictures, like Native Americans, we come out of the smoke, or we can never levitate. Don't do it too often, unless you're really skinny. You don't really get that far from the earth. We've been called pagans. Why? Because we don't have buildings where we go and pray. Our place of prayer is out there. And so people say, well, you're pagans and so forth, you worship animals. Well, we respect animals. We respect them just as you would a human being, having a spirit. So people will say, well, you worship animals. I'll tell you what, listening to the news, and you all look like you know what's going on in the news. I've been hearing about a shortage, okay? A shortage of meat, right? And when I hear people talk about it, it's like, oh my God, don't tell me you don't worship meat. If you get that upset, listening to a Burger King is not going to have a hamburger. Okay, go ahead. These are what we usually see when people are speaking about Native Americans. This is the artwork you will see. You'll see it showing up in different museums, many places you will see it. But not anymore. Go ahead. You will see a blank page. Hey, we pay you big bucks.
I know.
for this.
You do.
Okay, you get your information from what? The TV, from movies, from Dances with Wolves, which incidentally for us is history. We can take We could take an hour telling you about that, our history with it. But he took a lot of time taking all these people that came from Canada, all over the United States, and because we live in California, we knew many of them, actors who were called up to the Dakotas to learn how to speak, how to ride, how to wear certain clothes, spent weeks with people learning how to do it. So for us, it's probably one of the most authentic that you watch if you want to, really learn something about it. And let's see, go ahead, what's next? Or maybe you've seen or heard of movies like Smoke Signals, Powwow Highway. These are movies that are made usually not by Native Americans or Indigenous to show life on the reservation, okay? Life on the reservation varies from one state to another, how much money they're getting, how much money they're not getting. So, to say that they're all alike, that's not true. But they try to show you what life on reservations are like. Okay. These are books. These are books that are out that you can pick up and read about Crazy Horse's Vision, The Legend of Blue Bonnet, which is a beautiful story. Go ahead. And just to show you how they've taken the Native American thing. Oh, we go back the wrong way.
Oh my gosh, this day.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay,
Yeah,
right there.
102.
I don't know if you can read what it says. It says, one little Indian, or one little, two little, three little pilgrims. That's how they took the Native American. They even took us out of the nursery rhymes, But those are kind of books that our children are seeing in the schools. Go ahead, you can do it. There are many, many colleges that exist that are Native American colleges. These are just some of them here. And I've been very fortunate, and my wife and I have visited a couple of times down to Haskell University. And it's a fantastic university. It's in Lawrence, Kansas. Anybody who ever heard of Lawrence, they usually hear of the Kansas Jayhawks. That's where the university is. And that's in the city of Lawrence, but the bottom of the Lawrence city is Haskell University. Beautiful place. They have 800 to 900 students, and they come as far as Alaska. They're all invited to come. So you have a pretty good crowd of diversity there. Their classes, they're qualified to go into other areas, and their classes are fantastic. We were very fortunate to be able to even attend classes and to give classes there. That's what I was asked to go down for, because they felt that to have more of the Indigenous come down and teach classes would help the students. And they did. They were full of questions that, a short class became a long class. But it's nice to see these universities opening up. With the virus taking over, a lot of the universities have had to cut back, just like everywhere, because they didn't have the money for laptops, for a lot of the Zoom programs and so forth. But they do exist, and they would love to show you around. Just going on the university, they have a beautiful museum that shows a lot of the history of the Indigenous of Kansas. They show some of the statues that are made there. In fact, in the back of the university, they have a large Sundance area where they have powwows, and the students are encouraged to participate. And before they do, they have to learn, and they use different Indian nations from the kids who are attending. They will conduct it, because all the nations really do their dances and their traditions a little different. You'll always get a little different. But you give them an opportunity, and that way everybody learns about it. Okay.
I have a question. Are those universities exclusively for Indigenous only?
Yes.
Okay. And how are they funded?
The majority of them are funded, the states put up a lot of money, and the school board, it's the National Native American School Board, because the school board, they're separate, but the Native American School Board takes care of all elementary schools, the whole thing, and they're the ones that are responsible for getting the money, where they get it. A lot of times it's a lot of colleges, non-Indian colleges will, give money, or there are organizations that come up. And once in a while, you'll find somebody that, just like the governor of Colorado, Nyhorse, he had made some money, but he goes out and gets money to support the colleges.
Any of those universities have a medical school or a law school?
They're split around because they're so small. One will be a specialty in one thing or another. The particular one, Haskell, is not, it has biology, it has all of the sciences and so forth, but it's not a medical school.
Okay.
You will have some, I believe there's 3 of them in Wisconsin, because I went to Madison, Wisconsin, and met with some of their people there. And they have universities there and that are specialty in nursing, because they want to encourage them to go back to the reservation. They want them to participate.
Okay.
I have to keep looking. I don't see any heads nodding, so hopefully I don't put anybody else in. Anybody else have any questions? Please, you're not interrupting any flow. You have to understand, I do a lot of schools, so I get crazy questions, I know that I want to ask a question, and this means I got to go to the bathroom. So anything you want to ask, don't worry about it. I don't think you're going to ask us, I say us because my wife has been there for a lot of crazy questions that we've gotten. So please don't worry about asking questions. This is what artwork is now, okay? This is what's coming out of the colleges. You see a lot of the powwows, whenever it's held in a village that has a nation in it, they will put up artwork. And people, will buy them, take them home, and use them for different things. Good example. You see, in the upper corner, you see a mask, okay? Does that look familiar? This is written by Daniel Wildcat. He's one of the deans at Haskell University, but he's into climate change, and he's into working with the environment, saving the environment. He wrote this book, which is rather interesting because he took the artwork from some of the kids at the university, okay, and he incorporated that in his cover. And when he writes completely different than when you would think, because when you have someone talking about climate change and preserving the earth and so forth, if you have a spiritual connection with it, it's a lot different than if you're just talking about that's a piece of dirt and it collects, soot and so forth. But he writes as a person who has a connection with Mother Earth. It's a very good book, but you can see where the artwork came from. From there, it's kind of like he combined the face mask or the gas mask and Yoda. He got the colors of Yoda in it for some reason. But go ahead. This is other work. You don't expect nice work. You forget the things that have happened down the years. Many of these children have grandparents and parents who have been forced to go to residential schools, who have gone through some pretty vicious things, and they carry it over in their artwork. Prejudice is among us. We see it all over. And the Native Americans, especially around reservations, I know in Wyoming, Wind River Reservation, where we would stay, there was so much prejudice around Wyoming at that time. I don't know if any of you saw the movie Wind River. It doesn't really tell you much, but we know that on the reservation they have a lot of land that was theirs, And the state of Wyoming decided that they were going to have Central Wyoming University on Indian land. They got permission to do it. And of course, the reservation was, great, we got a university. The biggest problem is Native Americans are not really authorized to go there. They can't pass the test to it because their schools on the reservation are probably some of the worst attended as far as teachers. We don't get very good teachers there. So here's a university on reservation land, very few Native Americans there. These are some of the other books that are around, that are trying to get people to understand stereotypes, the reality of what it is. I'm sure there's still a lot of things that go around. And it's surprising, people ask us, do you celebrate now that they took Chief Yahoo off of the Cleveland Indians? It was a cartoon, it was a character, and then I look at the Atlanta Braves, right? I don't know how many of you watched the World Series, but do you see what they were doing during the game whenever they would score a run? The tomahawk chop. Give me a break, and so it's still going on. There are some places that respect it. The Washington football team respected it. Never thought that would happen, but it did. The funny problem is the coach of their football team is an Indian, so that ought to really scare the heck out of some of the football teams. But these are things that are happening right now, and we're seeing them. We respect them. We like seeing them, but it's kind of a little too late. This is another good book, American Indian History, 5 Centuries of Conflict and Coexistence. It tells a lot about the things that are going on all over the United States, and it's an eye-opener. Incidentally, I'm not selling books either, okay? I used to work for Borders Books. They don't exist anymore. So right now, I'm not. And this is one, Sakiyak. This is, for me, a really great book because it's written by 3 Inuit teens. The Inuit up north, this is Baffin Island. This is where I was living, right up here. And right here is the North Pole, okay? Now, we all think of the North Pole as being up here, but this is where the magnetic North Pole is, right there. I know I was there. I was there with a compass. What happens if you have a compass at the North Pole? It does that. I know I've gone to schools and I asked them, what's a compass do? Well, a lot of the kids had no idea what a compass is in the first place. So I said, okay, if I'm standing here, I'm standing on the North Pole, okay? And, let's see, and I take a step this way. What direction did I go? There's only 4 directions, You took the North Pole out. It's a good guess. I got 3 guesses. East. No, I'll go back. Okay, now, what happens if I go this direction? I go for the North Pole, I go this direction. What direction did I go?
West.
What direction?
West.
West? Come on back there. South. The only direction you can go, because you're on the North Pole, every direction you go is south. Thank you. But the kids love it. They stop and think about it. Oh, he's right. I don't get right too often. But going up there, the Inuit, the ones that had just come off of the ice, that were forced to leave the ice in '67, they don't speak English. They refuse to. The elders speak Inuktitut, and that's all they want to speak. Their children who were born on the ice and raised off the ice in these little square boxes that the Canadian government gave them, they had to learn how to speak English. And the Canadian government was going to teach them how to speak French, okay? Thinking this was Montreal. Well, it isn't, it's the North Pole. So They decided because of economic reasons, they would teach you English because you can use English on any web you want. French is not there. And yet these are three girls who are born off the ice, first generation, born off the ice and raised off the ice. And they start telling their lives because they've never been to a movie theater. They've never gone out to a fast food place. This is all new to them. And they're seeing it on television. And the government has been so nice that not only allows them to watch television, it gives them cable. And you know cable, a lot of R and X-rated stuff on there. So what they see up there, that's what they think goes on down here. And anyhow, they write about it because of what they are learning and the high rate of suicide. Because when they have 3 months of just black, especially young kids, they have no out. But this is a good book to read because you get an insight as far as what they see from their grandparents who are passing quickly, their parents, and now what they're learning now. Okay. Go ahead. Sherman, he's written a lot of books. One of them, this is the part-time Indian. There is one that the Lone Ranger and Tonto have a fist fight. That's one of his first books. And it's hilarious because basically what he's telling is the fight between the indigenous, the natives, and the Europeans. We had to tell our story too. We lived in Idaho, so we know a lot about what happened up there in Montana. Okay.
Turn it back to you.
Yeah, go back. Okay, that's all right.
Well,
That's okay. Okay, leave it there, that's good. This is what we have going on today. In 1492, 50 to 20 million. 2013, we're down to 5.2 million. The recognized nations, there's really 357. If you know anybody in the government, in the Board of Education especially, those are recognized. What they put in the books are, I believe, 500 and something. There's not 500 reservations. There's only 347. And Oklahoma has 38, with California 102. It's got it blocked out, but it's like 12,000 Indian Native Americans who have served and died during the wars. Okay. This is a good one. The 1948, 2 states had laws that barred American Indians from voting. American Indians faced some of the same barriers as blacks until passage of the Civil Rights Law in 1965. So even though they were given in 1924 the right to vote, there were states that withheld the vote because of the race. This is basically talking about the free rights movement, that they can now travel anywhere in the United States. Okay. And these are some of our friends. They are now educated, they're artists, they're writing books, they're doing many wonderful things. And unfortunately, there aren't as many as we would like, but they are very visible. Go ahead. Different nation dressed, you know what I mean? That looks like snake oil. Doesn't that look like snake oil? The yaki? Yeah. Anyhow, we were very fortunate to have a gathering, be part of a gathering up in Idaho, where we invited Indigenous from all over just to get together, come up for October, and, enjoy each other. And we had them come as far north as Barstow, in northern Alaska. We had a lady, a Yaqui, Snake Woman. And that lady there with the feather up, that's what she looks like. That came up to it. We had people from all over, people from the state of Washington, from all the different states. And it was so nice to get together and to see and to share. And everybody, brought their dances and their songs. Okay. Go ahead.
I wanted to say something that had happened at that gathering when they came to our house with Snake Woman. There were,
Honey, you can stand over here.
Yes,
Get the
ma'am.
mask off.
there were a lot of mixed people that had come, not just the Native Americans. And this one gentleman who was like, we're so used to it just Indians in the United States. That's, that you're an Indian. If you're from South America or whatever, wherever, they don't recognize. So this lady he was talking about, she's a medicine woman, and she's very strong, very outspoken, and she was standing in the very back, and everybody else, just about 30 people, were sitting on the floor. So he stood up and he said to her, well, how could you be from Mexico and be an Indian? We thought she was jumping right over everybody. She was so upset at that kind of thinking, where, it's only the United States that has Native Americans, and they're the only ones that are recognized. She was so upset, and then she talked with him, and he, even though his mother, they were white, even though his mother, what was Sitting Bull?
Sitting.
Yeah, she was a nurse up there during, a long time ago. And I just wanted to bring that up because that seems to be the thought. They forget that California was Mexico. And people that are, most of the natives, even the Chumash, who are the ocean people, Martinez, Velazquez, and their people, how could they be Indian if they've got names like that? It's just eye-opening to realize that people, are just pretty much, one-sided.
You want to have those people go to Africa and say, how many people there are named Adams or Jackson or, McCubbin or something? I said, no, guess where they got those names, guys?
I have a question.
Sure, go right ahead.
Are Aborigines considered as an indigenous people?
Yeah,
Okay,
yes,
so
they
there are
really
different
are.
tribes within Aborigine, or are they considered one group?
Well, an Aborigine is a definition of an indigenous. The Aborigines are the ones from not only Australia, you have, in fact, part of New Zealand, but really New Zealand has the Maori. They have different nations there. So you can see how close Australia is to New Zealand. And yet you have Maui. When you look at them, they look so much different than the Aborigines. So the Aborigines are primarily from Australia.
Okay. Now, I've always had a deep interest in burial practice, particularly for indigenous people. And I've always wondered if the funeral pyre, the practice of funeral pyres, is that belong to only a few select tribes that practice of that, or is that something the white man has invented?
Yeah, it's not
As far
really.
as lore.
You will see more pyres. You'll see them amongst the Vikings. Vikings love to put you in a sailboat and burn it out while you're in it.
Okay.
And of course, in India is where you
Yeah, I
see
know a
most
lot
of the
about
pyres
Indian
there.
culture.
Yeah, you won't see it. And of course, the wife will throw herself on the fire while the husband is dead, and she will go with him. Are you listening?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, but
okay.
she's staying, I'm telling you now.
I can't talk her into it, but what the heck, it's worth a try.
Well, as a kid growing up looking at Westerns, every time that they said sacred burial grounds in a movie, they always had the natives buried up in the trees, okay? As if the ground was considered Mother Earth and then the sky was like Father Sky, and therefore, it was almost like they were trying to make you believe that they thought the ground was not a sacred place to be buried in.
The animals are sacred, and that's who they live with too. The birds and so forth are, because the body doesn't mean anything to them. It is
Okay,
now becoming, and when it does get, when the birds and so forth have cleaned it up and maggots or whatever, then it gets buried, because by then it's dust. So it doesn't mean anything at that
okay, so
time.
was that ever actually a true practice of any
Of putting them up.
indigenous people putting you up in a
Oh,
tree?
yes, like I said, it's a cycle.
Okay,
To the indigenous, to the Inuit. And
Okay.
incidentally, if any of you have to leave, I'm sorry. My time is up, so they still throw me out, no problem. But when they talk about the burial services and all these other things, up north, you have a cycle. This is what I learned from the elders.
okay,
The cycle is like plankton and things at the bottom of the ocean, okay? And then you have different animals that eat that, and then the shrimp eat that. The seals eat the shrimp. The bears eat the shrimp, will eat that. And then the polar bear, and then when someone passes, to them, they want to have a good life for their children, their grandchildren. And they want to be part of the cycle, because they know if they contribute to this cycle, the cycle will take care of their grandchildren and children.
okay.
So they want to be part of it. And I know I've sat and I hope nobody gets upset and starts throwing the suicide word at me, but there are kids that I know that in the school, they would get up in the morning, they'd go have their breakfast, and they would look at the back door. And if they saw a pile of clothes there, it usually meant one of the grandparents knew it was their time and went out to be part of the circle,
I got
okay?
you.
And you don't go crazy or something, because they're doing it for you. They believe. And you can go through some religions and see what they believe, and it's no crazier than this. But this is a fact. They're a part of a cycle that will feed their families. So that, and another thing too, if you go up there, there aren't too many cemeteries. First of all, you can't dig in the ice and
Yeah,
in the dirt, in the ground. It's very hard. And the only places you'll find any cemeteries are if you have missionaries or, any religious group that goes out that wants to convert them from being spiritual to being religious,
okay.
which they don't have a word for religion, period.
Mhm.
They have a word for spiritual, but not for religion.
Maybe not for religion, okay.
Anything else? Listen, I really appreciate your patience. We made it. Thank you, Tori. Yeah.
My apologies to Carlos and Audrey for that. I should have known that the computer was not working well, and
It wasn't.
it died.
No.
But anyway, we want to thank you so much for coming and just smudging this room was a benefit in itself. But Carlos has done this many years now, and like you said,